Casey Anthony is a name that I definitely shouldn't be saying in 2025. But here we are. Hey everyone, my name is Skylar and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about the disaster that is Casey Anthony joining TikTok. But before we can discuss that, I want to give a disclaimer that this is not a true crime channel. I'll be discussing aspects of the Casey Anthony case because how could I not in a video like this? But if you're looking for a good true crime channel, I don't want you to subscribe and be disappointed. If you're looking for a commentary and deep dive channel, on the other hand, consider subscribing. This video will be discussing the death of a child, an attempted suicide, and child abuse, including sexual assault. So if you aren't interested in hearing about that today, please keep yourself safe and maybe watch a different video. With that out of the way, let's dive in. Kaylee Marie Anthony was born on August 9th, 2005 to an evil mother named Casey Marie Anthony. Little is known about the details of Kaylee's tragically short life, but testimonies of Casey's friends at the time say that Casey appeared to be a loving and caring mother. Little did they know it was to come. On July 15th, 2008, Kaylee's grandmother, Cindy, made a series of calls to 911 and reported her as missing after Casey admitted that Kaylee had been missing for 31 days. There's a lot of similar names in this case. Just try to remember that Kaylee is the baby, Cindy is her grandma, and Casey is an evil bitch. Casey led police on a wild goose chase when they were trying to find her daughter and lied to them about people's involvement and even existence. She made people up and blamed them for her daughter's disappearance. Luckily, police didn't fall for this shit once they realized that Casey is a compulsive liar, and in October of 2008, she was charged with the murder of Kaylee. Kaylee's remains were found in a wooded area near the family home in December, and this, combined with Casey's involvement, drove her grandfather, George Anthony, to attempt suicide in January 2009. Luckily, this attempt was unsuccessful, but I'm still going to mention it because it makes this next part more disgusting. In May 2011, Casey's trial began, and her lawyer dropped the bombshell accusation in his opening statement that Casey learned to lie because George sexually assaulted her when she was a child. Let me make it clear that you should always believe victims when they tell their stories, unless it's Casey Anthony. It feels super wrong to discredit someone's potential abuse, and I know that, but this is a known manipulative and habitual liar whose life was on the line in this case. She was potentially up for the death penalty. I think it's safe to say that she lied. Of course, George denied all the accusations in court, both the accusations of assault and the accusations that the murder was actually his fault. The defense's argument was that Kaylee drowned in a swimming pool when no one was looking, and while Casey was panicking about it, George blamed her for Kaylee's death and covered it up as murder. There's a lot more details to this case that are worth scrutinizing, but again, this isn't a true crime channel. I'm just giving context so you can understand what Casey did and why people hate her. I'll put a few videos in the description that discuss the case in more detail though, because it is super interesting how the legal system had all that evidence and still managed to fuck up. On July 5th, 2011, Casey Anthony was somehow found not guilty of murder or child abuse. In the end, she was only charged with a few counts of lying to police, and since she spent time in jail since her arrest, she only served 10 days after sentencing before her release. She decided to lay low for a few years, can't say I blame her, and had a brief experiment with running a photography business before deciding to settle into private investigating. I wish I was kidding. On March 1st of this year, Casey Anthony decided to join TikTok and prop herself up as a legal advocate despite not having the licensing to be in the legal field and not being able to get it because she's literally a felon. She mainly joined TikTok to promote her Substack, which is, from what I can gather, it looks like Patreon and Twitter's ugly baby. She said a bunch of bullshit in her TikTok debut, but I'll just let her say it instead.
I sweat to death.
I wish you would.
Today is Saturday, March 1st, 2025. This is my first of probably many recordings on a series that I'm starting. I am a legal advocate. I am a researcher. I've been in the legal field since 2011.
Being accused of murder isn't the same thing as working in the legal field, but okay.
And in this capacity, I feel that it's necessary, if I'm going to continue to operate appropriately as a legal advocate, that I start to advocate for myself and also advocate for my daughter.
Where was the advocating for your daughter when police were looking for her or when you dumped her in the woods, Casey?
For those of you who don't know, my name is Casey Anthony. My daughter is Kaylee Anthony. My parents are George and Cindy Anthony. This is not about them. This is not in response to anything that they have said or done. That's not to say that I'm not going to respond at some point to some of the things that they have said and done. The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself. I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people.
I think it's interesting that she's so dedicated to giving a voice to people who apparently don't have one, when she silenced the voice of her daughter before she could probably form coherent sentences.
To give people tools and resources that they can utilize so they actually know where they can turn to. So with that, please join me on Substack.
No.
If you have questions, I will set up an email address where we can correspond directly. Up until this point, that has never happened. And it's only going to be on a limited basis regarding legal issues, legal matters.
If someone can get a hold of this email address, I want them to publicize it so everyone can sign it up for annoying newsletters. Maybe a few mommy blogs so we can get our point across.
One of the main reasons that I'm doing this, there are people close to me who have been targeted and attacked recently. There are also people close to me who have had some recent things occur. And when necessary, people needed to step up, myself included.
I guess Kaylee wasn't close enough to her to have her step up.
So as a proponent for the LGBTQ community, for our legal community, women's rights, I feel that it's important that I use this platform that was thrust upon me and now look at as a blessing as opposed to the curse that it has been since 2008.
First of all, I want to make it clear that Casey Anthony has indirectly called the death of her child a blessing in 2025, seeing as she thrust herself into this oh so horrible spotlight by killing her daughter, pretending she was missing, and not reporting it for a month. Second, I promise that women and the LGBTQ community do not need the help of Casey Anthony. I'm almost positive the only reason she shows support for the LGBTQ community is in an attempt to look more appealing to an audience that's the same age Kaylee should be.
With that, these aren't going to be perfect. They're not going to be edited. Most of the time, they're not going to be short.
They're only long because that makes them profitable. I'm gonna do you a favor and cut out the part where she's plugging herself, since she only did that to make the video longer, because only videos over a minute long make money on TikTok.
I will explain in great detail why it's so important for people to protect their privacy. It's not just important to public figures, it's even more important to private individuals. And with the current climate in our country especially, it's that much more important, which is why I am utilizing.
She basically spends the rest of the video promoting Substack and ends it with, "We'll see how this goes." It went about as fantastic as you'd expect. In classic TikTok fashion, the entire platform turned against her and reminded everyone that the one thing all Americans can agree on is that Casey Anthony is a murderer, including convicted murderers, by the way.
Casey Anthony has a new Substack where she's charging people to give them legal advice. Even though she's not a lawyer, like, do you think that's a good thing? What do you think about that?
Gypsy Rose Blanchard is controversial in her own right, both for her crime and how she's acted since release. But if you're causing visible fear on her face, you obviously fucked something up. As the TMZ interviewer with Gypsy stated, Casey is doing all of this for monetary gain, which is both disgusting and not shocking in the slightest. In case it slipped your mind, let me remind you that Casey Anthony is a convicted felon who spent 4 years in prison, and while she's innocent in the government's eyes for Kaylee's murder, it's still incredibly hard to be hired as a felon. That's why she tried starting a photography business. That's why she tried starting a private investigator business. And it's why she's trying to pivot to making money through social media content. She tried making money by disconnecting herself from her crime, which didn't work. She tried making money by connecting herself to the legal field, which didn't work. So now she wants to make money off of the one thing she's known for. Kaylee. I doubt any streaming services want to make another Casey Anthony documentary since there's already so many. And I'd bet you $20 that any money Casey got from those interviews is drying up. I already compared Substack to Patreon because they both have subscription-based models. If you want to see Casey Anthony's content, then you have to pay her directly to even look at it. In the clip that I cut out of Casey's first TikTok, she mentions wanting to post the video on Meta platforms.
Advertising this and publishing this on TikTok possibly also through other Meta platforms,
which can also pay you for video content. She's desperate to tie together the influencer lifestyle with her legal advice. And it's not only gross, but illegal. Granted, Casey Anthony isn't concerned with the legality of things, but for those of us who are, I should probably let you know that under the state of Florida statute 454.23, any person not licensed or otherwise authorized to practice law in this state who practices law in this state or holds themselves out to the public as qualified to practice law in this state commits a felony of the 3rd degree. According to Florida law, which is where Casey lives, that can be up to 5 years in prison. Someone could probably argue that since Casey is using terminology like legal advocate, she's not saying she's certified in law, but she literally is. She said she's been practicing in the legal field since 2011, and she hasn't. She tried opening a private investigation firm, which is a form of legal practice. There's concrete evidence that Casey Anthony is breaking this law, but there was also concrete evidence that she killed her daughter, so we know the state of Florida doesn't really give a fuck what she does. Luckily, TikTok users do. Casey Anthony is an older millennial who's also really private about her personal life, meaning she doesn't know how to use social media very well and probably doesn't realize that her TikTok reposts are public. I went through her reposts myself, and they're practically dripping with manipulation. Some of it is edgy Gen X humor about women cursing, which is cringy, but whatever. But most of it is just her trying to paint herself in the best light possible. She's reposting pro-LGBTQ content, videos about protecting your peace, and a bunch of wholesome positivity posts. It kind of reminds me of that Tati Westbrook bullshit a few years ago where she went from calculated and conniving to spiritual and sympathetic. Casey Anthony wants to appear the best she possibly can, and no one on TikTok is buying it for a second. All the comments on her reposts, including some that I left, are calling her out and questioning her every move, or just dunking on her decision to repost it, which I love. Casey is a manipulator, and no one's gonna fall for her tactics. The best advice that I can give is to ignore her output. Don't like her videos, don't comment if she ever turns them on, and if you must address her, then do it in a way that'll never benefit her. If the Casey Anthony somehow stumbles onto this video, it won't matter, because her view and the hate comment that she may or may not leave will be money in my pocket instead of hers. She thought she could have a platform, but she shouldn't even have a place in the free world. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick of giving these heartless criminals a platform. I'm in the minority with this, but I think some crimes are justifiable given the right circumstances. Even things like murder. That being said, Casey Anthony is not justified, and she'll rot in hell for what she did to her baby. As of this video, Kaylee should be 19 years old. And as a 22-year-old who happened to live in Florida at the time of her murder, fun fact, I think Kaylee should be the one making TikToks in her car and laughing about sweating to death instead.